Welcome back to my views and news. Viewers, several uh, viewers are asking questions, several experts are giving their opinions about the shortcomings, the deficiencies in Ethiopian army's operation in the Amhara region against Fano. Why is that ENDF is unable to stop Fano fighters? Fano factions expanding their control. They're not controlling territories, but their control on local governments is expanding. Local governments becoming paralyzed, acknowledged by top military leaders. So, what is the reason? Is ENDF pulling punches? Is ENDF not capable enough? What is the reason? So, we'll have a look at the situation in the Amhara region from ENDF's perspective. There are a few limitations on the part of Ethiopian National Defence Force, some shortcomings too, due to which ENDF is unable to stop Fano factions, and on daily basis we are seeing reports of assassinations, reports of pressure being exerted by Fano fighters on city governments. First important limitation being faced by Ethiopian National Defence Force is that it is difficult for ENDF to separate Fano fighters and civilians. Fano fighters are basically civilians. They are youths, farmers, etc. From all walks of life they are, and they are members of Fano too. At night they are Fano fighters, in the day they are civilians. How to distinguish between unarmed civilians and Fano fighters? Ethiopian National Defence Force has no data of Fano fighters, names, addresses, no data. Ethiopian military has. And by the way, military faces the same problem in Oromia too, that at night people are Ola fighters, in the day they are common Oromos. And that is what happened in Tigray too. Though in the first month of the war, we saw that ENDF swept across Tigray. All major town cities came under ENDF, EDF control. But the Tigrayan resistance could not be eliminated. Why? Because back then Tigrayan started guerrilla warfare. They split into units of a few dozen, less than a dozen, around a dozen of fighters. They were not wearing any uniforms. They mingled with locals. They used to receive aid too, posing as locals, and they were fighters too. So it was difficult for Ethiopian National Defence Force, for Eritrean military, to distinguish between Tigray fighters and civilians. Same is happening here. Fano fighters are people, common people. For ENDF, it's a challenge to distinguish, to differentiate Fano fighters from civilians. Fano fighters mingle with civilians, and when military tries to arrest civilians, tries to identify civilians and Fano fighters, civilians take to the streets. They start protesting. If Fano fighters, if civilians suspicious of being Fano fighters are killed, people say civilians killed, civilians killed by Ethiopian National Defence Force. So it's a dilemma for Ethiopian National Defence Force how to separate Fano fighters and civilians. First limitation, due to which ENDF is unable to stop Fano fighters. Secondly, there are people in government backing Fano factions. We cannot deny that. Fano has sympathy in government quarters. Johannes Buyaleo's leaked phone call is a piece of evidence. He called East Amhara Fano PR officer. He told the PR officer that 3 armies, 3 corps were coming to take Fano fighters from Gashina, from Wollo, from another part. He talked about what happened at Amhara Regional Council meeting. He shared plan. He talked about negotiations too. So he is very close to Fano fighters. He's directing them. He's telling them that the negotiation is just a cover-up. It would give time to Fano fighters to regroup themselves. They can regroup, reorganize, get food, etc. This is being said by Johannes Buyaleo, Amhara Regional Council member. There could be several Johannes Buyaleos in Amhara regional government backing Fano factions, secretly in touch with Fano factions. Some could be supportive of Fano's ideology. Some could be supporting Fano because of their fractured relations with top leadership. Like Johannes does not have good ties with PM Abiy, with top Amhara leaders. Disgruntled. He is a supportive of Fano's ideology. So Fano has support from government quarters. Thirdly, no military operation can succeed without political backing. Politicians back military operations. Politicians speak on behalf of generals, on behalf of military. You saw what happened in the 2-year-long war in Tigray. ENDF launched operation. Politicians were behind the operation. Parliament was behind the operation. Parliament declared TPLF a terrorist party. TPLF's assets are frozen. All politicians supported the war. A narrative was built that TPLF was an enemy of Ethiopia. That narrative was launched by politicians. Generals, soldiers were fighting on the ground. Politicians, government officials were speaking. Here, political backing is missing. When the operation was launched against Fano, we saw that in the first few days, people spoke in support of the operation. People like Girma Shijela, assassinated. Now, no one is supporting this operation. Have you heard anyone from the Amhara region in the last 10 days supporting the operation against Fano? Or anyone on federal level supporting the operation on Fano? Any politician? I have not heard from anyone within the last few days. It means that political backing is missing. No military operation can succeed without political backing. And no one is telling the casualty number of Ethiopian National Defense Force. People are dying, ENDF soldiers dying in attacks by Fano fighters. Fano fighters are burying their colleagues with honor. People attending their funeral ceremonies. But ENDF is not acknowledging its losses. No one knows how many ENDF soldiers killed. Why? Political backing is missing. ENDF does not want to admit its losses. Third, very important point. And fourth point is about the way ENDF is trained. Militaries are not trained for this type of warfare. There are specialized military units which can carry out operations like these. But here, ENDF is grappling with a group which has launched a full-fledged guerrilla war. ENDF is not a guerrilla war force, it's an army. PM Abiy says it's turning into a modern army, equipped with modern weapons, drones, tanks, artillery pieces, MLRs. But this military is unable to counter a guerrilla force, because this military was trained like militaries are trained. Tigrayan military commanders had experience of guerrilla war. Eritreans, long experience too. Fano fighters, they are militia members, so they have experience of guerrilla war. ENDF is not trained for guerrilla war. So there is this basic skill difference too. ENDF will have to turn into a guerrilla war force, or it will have to have some specialized units to launch a defensive guerrilla war. So this is another shortcoming faced by Fano, by Ethiopian National Defense Force in the fight against Fano fighters. Fifthly, public support. We spoke on this issue in a previous video too, that Fano fighters are using public support to their advantage in a very skillful manner. Wherever they come under pressure, they call for public support, public blocks roads, ENDF's convoys are intercepted, stopped, and military cannot confront tens of thousands of people. Millions of Amharas cannot be confronted by military. A few thousand soldiers, they cannot stop big protests. We have seen big protests, unarmed, empty-handed youths throwing stones at armed ENDF soldiers, and they were not in a position to respond. Had they fired at protesters, it would have led to more embarrassment for Ethiopian National Defense Force. In case of civilian killings, ENDF would have faced public pressure for accountability. In case of retreat, embarrassment. So ENDF in a difficult position, that people start protesting whenever Fano is under pressure. Fano fighters join people, they instigate people to protest, military retreats. Same pattern seen in Gujjam, Gondar, other parts of Ethiopia. And the Fano side is building a narrative that it's not Ethiopian military, it's an Oromo military. Those who are fighting are not Amhara soldiers. Amhara soldiers don't want to fire at Amharas. The narrative is that military is led by Oromo generals. Most of the soldiers are non-Amharas. Fano has built this narrative. Which narrative has been built by Ethiopian military to counter Fano? The narrative built that Fano fighters are terrorists and extremists did not sell. Amhara people rejected the narrative that Fano fighters are terrorist extremists. Fano's narrative is selling. ENDF's narrative is not selling. This narrative building is important to win wars, because propaganda is based on narrative building. ENDF failed here. ENDF took Fano very lightly. It believed the operation against Fano would take a few days, just a few groups comprising a few dozen people with no unity, with no manifesto, with no capabilities. But now they are realizing that Fano could be a hard nut to crack. So these are a few limitations of the Fano fighters which we discussed. There are several others too. I try to analyze this insurgency in the Amhara region from my own perspective. You can add your input too in a comments section. We try to understand the situation in the Amhara region together, learn from each other. Purpose is to find a solution, to tell the people in positions of power that fighting is not a solution to any problem. It's a message to Fano fighters too. They cannot achieve all their goals by force. They cannot pull PM Abiy out of Addis Ababa. One day they'll have to sit for talks. But problem is that in Ethiopia only armed groups are taken seriously. Fano was not being taken seriously when it wasn't attacking police, PP members, etc. After it proved its capabilities, now it is being taken seriously. But now Fano wants to continue along the path of armed confrontation, it seems. Thank you for watching.